This is Story Recapped. Today I'm going to explain a horror and sci-fi show called Love, Death, and Robots Beyond the Aquila Rift. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. Somewhere in space, a group of freight spaceships is waiting in line for a surge point gate to warp them to their destination. Among the spaceships is the Blue Goose, where the captain, Tom, complains about the queue. On the other hand, Ray complains about his hangover, so Tom reminds him that next time, they only celebrate their successful job after they returned home. He asks if they're ready for the trip, and Ray notes that the queue jibs are slightly misaligned, which might make their transition more turbulent, but he gives a thumbs up nonetheless. Their navigator, Susie, also assures him that their course is plotted. As she shows him on their holographic map, Susie shares that she discovered a shortcut across a local bubble. Tom approves of the shortcut, hoping that it'll gain a bonus for their run. Over the intercom, Archangel Dispatch, who manages the surge point gate, announces that they're clear to enter, so Susie sends them their course. The trio then enters their surge tanks that would protect them during the lightning speed journey, and Tom gives Dispatch the go signal to proceed. Dispatch teasingly offers the crew a lullaby to help them sleep, and Tom answers that he likes it sultry and slow. The Blue Goose slowly approaches the surge point while the crew's surge tanks fill up with protective substance. As soon as the Blue Goose is inside, a bright light flashes. Soon, Blue Goose's cockpit blares its alarm, filling the room with red light. Tom wakes up with his tank open and sees the control board signaling a system error. Using the lack of gravity, he floats to the window and finds that their ship is being docked in a massive repair facility. Tom wakes up Susie, and despite her groans, he orders her to wake up Ray. Tom then checks their map to figure out where the surge point sent them, noting that he doesn't recognize the repair facility station. Suddenly, the doors hiss open, and personnel in armored suits come in. One of them retracts her helmet and immediately recognizes Tom. Surprised, Tom breathlessly greets his old friend Greta. Tom asks what happened to their ship, so Greta explains that they found an error in their routing plot. Susie refuses to believe that she made a mistake in their navigation, but Greta assures her that it's more likely that Dispatch had a glitch in the syntax launch patterns. Hearing this, Susie stands up in anger but finds herself disoriented from the trip. Tom asks how far they got sent, and Greta answers that they were sent to Saumlaki Station in the Shadar sector, which is light years off their course. Unable to believe that a routing error sent them that far, Tom groans in frustration. Susie demands to see the ship's logs, but she feels dizzy and collapses in Tom's arms. Greta thinks Susie is experiencing tank sickness, which isn't uncommon. She suggests placing her back inside the tank until they can sort things out, so Tom carries her back inside. Given Susie's case, Greta also suggests keeping Ray asleep. Tom thanks Greta, noting that the situation is horrible, but at least he got to see a friendly face. Seeing him worried, Greta assures him that Susie will be alright. After settling Susie inside her surge tank, Greta beckons Tom to join her. She promises that their engineers will check their ship, although they might be stuck there for a few weeks, so she suggests for Tom to enjoy his stay. Later, at the bar inside the station, Tom quietly nurses his drink when Greta walks in, wearing a gold dress. She joins him in watching the asteroid field before them and points out that the Aquila Rift is just beyond the filament ahead of them. Unable to share her enthusiasm, Tom apologizes. He confesses that he's still trying to make sense of the situation and how it led to them reuniting all the way out in space. Greta suggests that it's fate and then whispers suggestively to him. She admits that since they met in Thalinen, she'd been hoping to see him again. Tom mentions that it was when they had a fling 3 years ago, but Greta playfully punches him. She corrects him that it was 4 years ago and it was more than a fling. She reminisces about the time they broke a hotel bed, commenting that she couldn't believe they could get that intense in zero gravity. Tom mentions that he sometimes wishes he stayed with her, but Greta assures him that she understands. At least they're together now, and that's what matters. Their conversations lead them to getting intimate in Greta's cabin. As their passion grows intense, Tom lifts Greta and makes love to her against the window overlooking the stars. Afterward, Greta watches Tom smoking on her bed, commenting that she finds it attractive when men think. When he doesn't respond, she grows serious and decides to confess something. The routing error sent them farther than she said earlier, and they're not in the Shadar sector. To explain, Greta activates a holographic map of the galaxy. Starting from the Saumlaki Station, she zooms the map further away until she shows another star system, 150,000 light years away from Earth. Stunned, Tom asks how long they were asleep in the surge tanks, and Greta reveals that they were asleep for a few months within their ship, but it counts as several hundred years on Earth. Regretfully, she adds that even if they found a way back home, it won't be the same world they left. Greta apologizes for lying, but she reasons that sometimes people have a hard time accepting the truth. Tom swings his hand angrily, deactivating the holographic map. Upset about the revelation, Tom notes that he's as good as dead, but Greta assures him that he's not because he's here with her. With that thought, Tom questions how Greta could possibly be there. Greta explains that the same routing error brings people where she is. Then, she suggests waking up the rest of his crew. After much thought, Tom wakes up Susie. Immediately, she asks if they returned home, but instead, Tom asks what's the last thing she remembers. Susie recalls talking to the Archangel Dispatch and having dreams. When Tom asks about her dreams, Susie notices Greta sitting nearby. Her eyes stare at the woman coldly as she answers that her dreams were similar to their encounter now. Susie backs away in fear while demanding who Greta is. Tom reminds her that she's Greta, whom Susie met back in Thalanin, but Susie insists that she's not Greta. Tom thinks she's just confused because of the tank sickness, but Susie continues to panic. Tom assures her that everything will be okay, and Susie calls him a terrible liar. Greta interjects, advising Susie to take it easy. Instead, Susie confronts Greta, demanding who she really is. Tom tries to calm her down, but Susie pulls away and screams for Tom to look at Greta. Susie then grabs the statue from Greta's hand and swings it at her. Greta evades her attacks, but soon, Susie drives her into a corner and plunges the statue down. Greta and Tom hold on to Susie, but Susie still creates a small wound on her neck. Finally, Tom pulls Susie off of Greta, allowing her to inject the young woman with a tranquilizer. Susie limps in Tom's arms, and Greta touches her wound worriedly. Still, she smiles and assures Tom that they can try as many times as it takes to get Susie back on her feet. She leaves him to tend to an unconscious Susie by himself. That evening, Tom is unable to sleep as he ponders over Susie's accusations. He checks on Greta and finds that the wound on her neck is gone. Knowing that Greta isn't asleep, he asks if Susie was right, and she's not the real Greta. Greta apologizes in response and reveals that he's still in his tank asleep. Greta gets up and adds that the entire station is a simulation. When she touches him to comfort him, Tom pulls away and demands that she stop trying to trick him. Instead, he wants the whole truth. Greta stresses that some of what she said was true. They did end up in the place because of a routing error, and they are beyond the Aquila Rift, thousands of light years away from Earth. It's just that the station they're in is different. Tom asks who is feeding them the simulation, and Greta says that she's doing it all. He slams her against the window, demanding what she is, and for a split moment, the room changes. Greta warns Tom that he's not ready for the answer, but Tom insists on being the judge of that. Still, Greta pleads because she's been in this scenario with many lost souls before, and she doesn't want to hurt Tom. Tom stresses that he needs to see this place and who she really is. Tearfully, Greta refuses, so Tom slams her on the window again. Defeated, Greta finally agrees. Before revealing the truth, she insists that she cares about Tom and all the lost souls that end up there. In a flash, Tom wakes up in the reality where his face and body have shriveled into skin and bones. He looks up and finds himself in the hellish place that was once the Blue Goose. Outside their ship are countless others, trapped in vein-like strings of an alien hive. He looks around and sees the ruined bodies of Ray and Susie in their tanks. A female voice greets him, and Tom looks into the cockpit's exit. From there, a feminine silhouette approaches. However, when she steps into the light, Greta reveals her true form as an arachnid-looking alien. Tom screams at the horrid sight and returns to the simulation. When he opens his eyes again, Tom exits his surge tank as normal. The doors hiss open, and Greta, back in her beautiful form, arrives. Having seen Tom's mind break upon witnessing the reality, Greta has erased his memory, so Tom is surprised to meet his former lover again. He asks her what happened, and she tells him the same story, that they're in some lucky station in the Shadar sector due to a routing error. Despite the troubling situation, Greta tells him that at least he's seeing a friendly face. Outside the simulation, however, the Blue Goose is still trapped in the alien hive where countless wrecked ships also lost their way.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.